right, well, hey, welcome. Hey, if it is your first time with us or first time in a long time, man, we are so glad that you guys are here. You literally, and I mean literally, could be doing anything else right now. We know school's crazy. We know that extracurricular activities are crazy right now. And so, man, it means so much to us that you guys are spending your Sunday evening with us. But you need to know this. Hey, I don't know how you showed up here tonight. I don't know if your friend dragged you here, your parents made you show up, or man, you just wandered in here and you're like, I don't know why I wandered in here, but I'm here, so this is happening. I don't know where you're at, but here's a little bit of where I'm at. So on Wednesday night, I got a little bit sick. I mean a lot of sick, and so I went home, and then I wasn't feeling good, and then Thursday, Friday was just this awful, like, being in bed all day. And I'm going to be real with you. Yesterday, I felt way better, but I stayed in bed all day. And here's the reason. I just felt really depressed. I felt really stressed. There's a lot of stuff in my life right now that just is making life a little overwhelming at the moment. We're trying to buy a new home and process family stuff and church stuff and all those different things. And so it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. And so I got to be real. I woke up this morning, and I didn't want to show up today. I'm just going to be honest with you. I didn't want to drive up and be here today. I wanted to stay home, go to bed, watch a movie, and chill with my cats. Like, that sounded like a much better day to me. But I had to be here. And here's why I share that. I don't share that to be like, oh, I didn't want to hang out with you guys. Man, I love hanging out with you guys. I look forward to this every week. But I know that you guys, some of you guys that are sitting in this room, have days like that too. And the reason I say that is I need you to know, hey, if you're struggling with that, if you're sitting in this place and you're like, man, I don't know if I want to be here. Man, I'm just tired. I got a lot of stuff going on in my life, a lot of things I'm processing. It is difficult for me to be here right now. I want you to know this. Hey, me too. And I don't understand everything that you're going through. I don't understand the details of what you're going through. It is a very different situation, but you need to know that you're not alone in those feelings, that many of us have days where we wake up and we're like, man, I'm not feeling it today. Like, today's not the vibe. Like, I don't know, school, maybe some of us is for school. We have those days where we wake up, right, and we're like, today's the last day. I have 3 tests today, and, man, it is the worst day to have tests. I don't think I can focus. I got all these different things going on. And so, man, if you're feeling that in this place, it's okay. Man, we see you, and we're glad that you're here. But hey, if you joined us last week, we started a new series called Legacy. So the series also relates to our new name for our ministry going forward, because over the next few weeks, we want to talk about, hey, what does this mean? All right, we can call ourselves Legacy. We can make it all cool and get some new merch down the road, which is coming, so we'll get ready for that. But we're going to get merch and all this other cool stuff, right? New graphic. But what does it mean to leave a legacy? Well, last week we had a guest speaker by the name of Andrew, who's one of my buddies that I grew up doing ministry with, and he shared something that I thought was so important, and he said that in order to leave a legacy, whether you like it or not, you're leaving one. So are you going to choose to leave a positive legacy or a negative one? Are you going to choose to leave a legacy for the kingdom of God, or are you going to choose to leave a legacy for yourself and the world? And over the past week, man, I've thought about that. I've been sitting on that, what he talked with us last week. Man, what's the legacy that I've been leaving in my story? And so I thought back all the way to high school Tanner, and I was like, what was the legacy of high school Tanner? And the legacy of high school Tanner was I was trying to get as many accomplishments as I could, as many sports titles as I could, as many, like, different celebrations to make my dad proud. And so I would try to do all these different sports, try to be the best in those sports, just so that I could get that affirmation that I was looking for. And so the legacy that I was leaving was one of accomplishment. And what I realized really, really fast was when I look back on that, the legacy that I was actually leaving was a little selfish. And it was all about Tanner. And I wasn't doing it, some of it was to get affirmation from my dad, but really it wasn't for that. It was just so I could feel better about myself. And so I had all these different things that I would try to accomplish, all these different things. And I'm not saying that those things are bad, but for me, it became an obsession. And the legacy that I was leaving me burnt out. It was leaving me in a place where I felt alone. And then I became a Christian. And you think that everything would get better, right? Like, that's what it's supposed to happen, right? Well, kind of. I did have this new life that I got, this hope, this relationship with God, and obviously that made my life better. But when I became a Christian, the legacy that I started to leave was trying to live a perfect life. And I was trying to be perfect and say the right things, and I was going to drink less now, and I was going to not cuss anymore. I was going to do all these things. I was trying to be perfect. And then what ended up happening in that process is I didn't actually do it for God. I did it for me again. And instead of becoming godly, I became self-righteous. And I made myself better than other people. And I would judge people, and I would push them down, and I would try to just convert them and all these different things. And once again, a lot of these things aren't necessarily bad, but the way that I was expressing it because of my motive was. And so that's me. That's the legacy that I left in high school. But that's not the legacy that I want you guys to leave in high school. I don't want you guys to look back on your high school years and think to yourself, man, I did that all for me, and then when I graduated, it meant nothing. But instead, I want you guys to leave a legacy that will last forever, a legacy that matters. And so what is it for you? Right now, as you sit here, what is the legacy that you're leaving? Is it being the top of the class with your grades, being the star athlete? Maybe it's as simple as just trying to be a good person. Maybe that's the legacy that you're trying to leave. And once again, none of these things are bad. See, all of us in this room, deep down inside, want our lives to be significant, right? Nobody wakes up and goes, man, I hope my life means nothing. No, we all want our lives to be significant. We all want our lives to make a difference in this world. Now, maybe for some of us, we might be more introverted, and we don't want people to see it. But all of us, we want our lives to be significant and to have meaning. And so my question for us is, what if the ways that you and I have pursued legacy, have pursued how we're going to be remembered, what if the ways we've pursued it has actually been something that's been missing the whole time? What if we're actually missing something very crucial to when it comes to our lives and our stories? What if leaving a legacy actually isn't even really about us? Now, that might seem so countercultural and weird and things like that, but what if leaving a legacy is not even about us, at least a legacy that matters? Well, I think in order for us to answer these questions, it's important for us to look at an example of a legacy that's lasted for thousands of years. Now, I don't know where you're at with Jesus in the Bible and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you don't believe him. That's all right. But there is no denying that the words that Jesus said and that his disciples said has left a legacy that has changed the world for thousands of years and continues to change the world. And so we're going to be jumping in and looking at this letter written by this guy named Paul. Now, I love Paul. This dude was a baller. And so we're going to be looking at this letter that he writes to this church in Thessalonica. Big word. But here's some context that I think we need before we jump into the letter that we're about to read right now. All right, so Paul, usually he would write these letters, the thing that we're about to look at, but he would write them to all these different churches to encourage them, to challenge them, to help them grow in their faith with God. And here's what most of them usually said. He'd usually write a letter to a church and say, hey, guess what? You suck. And you need to do a better job, and you need to work on all these things, and I'm really disappointed, and here's how you can get closer to God. Usually his letters were kind of harsh like that. There's even parts where he would be like, so-and-so and so-and-so are toxic, and you need to call them out. And it's like, whoa, dude, you called them out by name? Like, that's a little harsh. But the letter that we're going to be looking at today goes to a church where actually we see the opposite. We see that he's actually saying, hey, thank you for the way that you're living your lives. Actually, you're encouraging me. You see, Paul, when it comes to Paul, there is no arguing whether it is you're a Christian or not. There is no arguing the fact that this dude had influence. I mean, this guy wrote almost the entire New Testament, and not only that, a lot of the things that he wrote has formed the ways that we think about government, the ways that we think about morality, the ways that we think about our world and our culture in some ways. A lot of the things that Paul has written has given a lasting legacy because of the way that he lived his life for God. Now, when it comes to this legacy, there's some crazy things. Not only did he leave a legacy that lasted forever that we can remember, but the people that lived with him back then knew that this guy was a pretty big deal too. And see, he had enemies. I mean, just to be honest, like Paul was more controversial than Kanye. Like this dude would roll up and people would be like, we got to cancel him. He's a little offensive. He's changing the world. What's going on? And so he had enemies. But even his enemies said stuff about Paul that he was an influencer and that he was changing the world. I'm not going to throw it up on the screen, but in Acts chapter 3, verse 6, it says, these are from his enemies. It said, when they did not find him, they dragged Jason, which was one of his friends, his brother, to the rulers of the city, crying out, those who have turned the world upside down have come here too. These are Paul's enemies saying, this dude has turned the world upside down. When he goes into different cities and different cultures, the culture changes. He doesn't. Like this dude is a literal world changer. But what's important about this letter that we're about to read is we have this influential man who would change the world because of what God was doing through him, sending a letter to an influential city. See, the church of Thessalonica is important, and some context behind it. It was considered like the trading outpost, like center of the entire Roman government. And so, like, lots of important people live there, lots of influential people live there. And that's important to know that because Paul's writing this letter, who's an influential person, to influential people. And so here's my question. When we talk about legacy, when we talk about leaving a legacy, I don't know about you, but I want to be like those people. I mean, they've been remembered throughout history because of the way that they lived out their faith. They're known as influential people. And see, like I said earlier, all of us in this room want to be remembered for being and doing something significant with our lives. And so my question is, how do we become culture-shaping people like Paul? How do we even begin to leave a legacy that lasts like he did? Well, if you want to leave a legacy that matters, the first thing that we need to do, guys, is, here it is, ready? We can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. For me at high school, I tried to do it alone. It was all about Tanner. And eventually, I burnt out. And when we look at the life of Paul, he always had people around him that would challenge him, encourage him. He always had his little crew where he could have community with them. And see, he was never alone. And even when he was arrested and he was isolated, he would think about the community and the relationships that he would have to give him hope because of the community and the legacy that he was living. But here's the thing. All of us in this room, we have to be a team. Now, you might walk in here and you might be like, I can't be on a team with that person on the other side, or I can't be a team because I don't know how to open up, or I can't be on a team with the people in this room because I don't really know them that well and all that stuff. So, how do I even begin to do that? And hey, I get it. I see you. Those feelings are valid. And maybe you're like, Tanner, what's the difference between this team and this community? Like, I see lots of teams, lots of communities, lots of people that get together all the time, but they don't change the world. Once again, I get it. And I see that. But when we look at this community that we're about to read about, there is no denying that they were influential and that they were changing the world. So how do we become like Paul? How do we become like the church in Thessalonica? Well, here's the opportunity that we get to have together for the next 10 minutes. We basically have a behind-the-scenes look, almost like a docu-series, like a Netflix binge that we get to do of a behind-the-scenes of how these people lived their lives for God. How Paul lived his life. This is almost like the camera in the locker room at halftime during March Madness, where we get to see the people hype up the team and how they're going to win the game in the second half. And so what we're going to be looking at is 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, starting in verse 17. But here's my hope for us before we read it. My hope is that we wouldn't just see what they did as a community. We wouldn't just read what they did, but we would become like them. We would start to do the things that they did so that this place would not just be legacy service on Sunday night, but that we could actually call it family. So let's jump into it in verse 17. It says, "But my brothers and sisters, when we were orphaned by being separated from you for a short time out of our intense longing, we made every effort to see you, for we wanted to come to you. And certainly I, Paul, did again and again, but Satan blocked our way. For what is our hope? What is our joy, or the crown in which our glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory, and you are our joy." All right, stay with me. You're probably like, all right, what does that mean? What is Paul saying here? So, at the beginning of his letter, he says, hey, I have been orphaned and I have been separated from you. Remember earlier I shared that little bit of a story with his enemies, right? They brought this dude Jason out. They're like, hey, bring Paul to us. We're going to beat this dude up. That's basically what's going on in that story. Paul sees this and he goes, ooh, this is dangerous for this community. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave to keep them safe. And this letter that he's writing is after he left to show them, hey, here's what I'm feeling after I was separated from you. Now, here's what Paul could have done. He could have wrote this letter and said, hey, I miss you. Hey, it's been a long time, LOL. Remember that memory, LOL? But instead, he uses this strong language of I've been orphaned and I have been separated from you. And the reason he does that is he's saying, hey, you're my family. You're my family. And man, when I'm separated from you, it isn't just like oh, I miss you, like it's been a long time, but it's like, hey, my heart aches. It is difficult being away from you. I've been thinking about you every day. Matter of fact, Paul even says here in just a second, he says, hey, I have been trying to get to you. I've been trying to get to you. I have thought about you. My heart longs for you. I love you. I care for you. And he's not saying this about one person. He's not saying this about two people. He's saying this about an entire community. And so here's my question for us. Have you, not someone, but have you ever written a letter like that to somebody? And I don't mean romantically. But have you ever written a letter to somebody, to a community, where you could be completely vulnerable like Paul is in this letter? Have you ever received a letter like that said, hey, I long to see you. I miss you. I love you. You mean so much to me. You're the best that I got. Have you ever gotten a letter like that? Maybe for some of us, the stuff that we're struggling with on the inside is because we've never gotten that. And that's what we are longing for. See, Paul is writing this letter. He's saying, I love you. I care for you. I want to see you. Now, there might be one person in this room that you can say yes to that. You might be like, yo, there's the 1-2 people in here that I can say, like, you know what? Yes, I love that person. I care for that person. When they hurt, I hurt. When they are rejoicing and they have joy, I do as well. But that's not the question I'm asking. Do you have a community of people that you have that with? I got to be real with you. I don't. I have a little group that's probably the closest that I can get to that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But man, what Paul's talking about here is a church. There is a community of people where he can say, I love you, I care for you, I long for you, and it's not weird. It's normal. And see, for us, if we want to have a community in this place that lasts forever, we have to be willing to talk to each other like this. We have to be willing to open our hearts in a way where we let people in. Now, I get it. That's scary. It's really scary. And many of us in this room, we don't open up our hearts. We shut down. We put our walls up because we're afraid to get hurt, right? And for many of us, it's for good reason. We have stuff in our stories that's difficult, and we've had people hurt us in the past. And we don't let anyone in because the last time that we did, we got hurt or someone betrayed us. And so, man, the idea of like opening up to a whole community, we look at that and we go, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. But here's the thing. What we see with this church is if we want a legacy that matters, if we want to be a community that's going to leave a legacy and have influence that's going to change the people around us, we have to understand this. Your walls are protective, but guys, they're toxic. Your walls are protective, but they're toxic. And many of us are sitting in this room and we just took a gut punch. Me too. Because we all have walls. We all throw them up. Maybe for some of us, we threw them up the second we walked into this place. Because when it comes to getting vulnerable, for many of us, these walls come from past hurt in our story. And man, we did try opening up, maybe even in this place, and we got hurt. Maybe that person betrayed us. And so we looked at that and we go, you know what? No, I'm not going to risk that again. But guys, the best communities are the ones that they're open hearts and they have open hearts and they let others in, regardless of what their story says or how it reads. Now, is that a risk? Absolutely. It is absolutely a risk. Matter of fact, we see Paul open his heart over and over and over again, and he had brothers that were close to him that hurt him, that betrayed him. We even see this with Jesus, right? We see that Judas betrays him, which was a brother. We see the disciples scatter after the crucifixion. They abandon what they were believing in that moment. See, this is a thing that happens in all of our stories. But here's the thing. All of us, we put these walls up to protect our heart because we go, you know what? I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to let anybody in. But here's the thing I'm going to say about that. If you don't open up your heart, man, I think you're risking so much more. You're risking so much more. Because if we're not careful, we can get into this spiral, and maybe you're feeling it right now. We walk into a place like this, and we go, nah, I'm not going to share in small groups. I'm going to put my walls up. And then 3 weeks go by, we've said nothing. And all of a sudden, there's that thing deep down inside that we need to talk about. But we go, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it because that'd be weird if I all of a sudden open up about this. So you know what? I'm not going to share anything. I'm just going to keep pushing it down. And then it's easy to have a day where we wake up and we go, you know what? I don't want to be here. And then that day can turn into multiple days. And then we haven't come in a long time. And before we know it, you're like high school Tanner, his senior year. Alone. See, growing up in high school, there's lots of parts of my story that were difficult. Lots of parts of my story that were hurtful. Some of you guys know parts of those stories. And it was really, really hard for me when I became a Christian to open up. It's still hard for me to open up, honestly. But especially my senior year of high school. And so I gave my life to Jesus, had this amazing moment, right? Started to get plugged into this community. And then, man, when people would ask me questions, it was like, nope, not talking. I'm not going to share anything. And the reason is because the way that my story read was a father that I love dearly and we reconciled, but man, when I was young, was not there for me. And so I'd open up, and then I would feel betrayed. And then I started to get hope, and I started to open up my heart to my stepdad. And as many of you guys know that story, there was lots of physical abuse in that. And it felt like, you know what, I opened up, and then this guy hurt me. And then I opened up to my youth pastor my junior year, gave my life to Jesus. He moved my senior year. And even though he didn't mean to hurt me, it hurt. And I felt like, once again, I was betrayed. And over and over and over again, I kept being betrayed, and it hurt. Then I put these walls up to a point where I realized I just wouldn't let anybody in. I just wouldn't let anybody in. And it got to a point where one day I looked around and I had no one. I had nothing. I was alone. And then I had a friend that I had for a long time that I hadn't heard from in a while that invited me to go to this Bible study when I graduated. And I was very apprehensive. And I showed up, and it was like 30 to 40, like, senior high school guys to college-aged guys that would meet in a house and do a Bible study together. So I walked in, and man, the first few weeks, I would say nothing. It was just like, yeah, that's cool. Like, yeah, I got that out of that. And then we would go, like, bowling or something, and then I'd be myself. And then we'd go back into the Bible study and questions, and I'd shut down. That same friend that invited me, he said, hey, Tanner, at this group, it was called Group at the time, you need to allow yourself to be yourself, or else you're never going to fully get that community. And I was like, who are you to say that, right? Like, don't judge me. And so, like, I was upset with him in the moment, but he was right. He was right. And over the next few months, I would slowly allow my heart to be open to let people in. And man, I look back on that time, that was the best thing I could have done. There is still 5 guys that are from that group that I continue to talk with, that we actually have a group text that we text each other every single day. Matter of fact, almost right before I got up here during the worship song and stuff, one of the guys texted in the group chat saying, hey, today has been one of the worst days that I've had in my life. Can you guys be praying for me? And some of us will start praying in the chat and things like that. But that's the only community I've ever had that I felt like I could open up my heart, let people in. But here's the thing. That's not supposed to be rare. That's supposed to be what the church is. That this is a place where we can open up our hearts, take that risk, and let people in a way where we can be wholehearted. Now here's the thing. These friends that I have, model what Paul is doing with this church. Which brings us to this. Paul was wholehearted. He was wholehearted. He wasn't halfway in. He didn't kind of care for them. No, he was 100% in. That when they cried, when they had a need, Paul felt it. He cried with them. That when they had joy, he had joy. That they loved each other in such a way that they shared all aspects of their life, the good, the bad, the ugly, and that they would have encouragement because they would go to God together. See, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to risk giving everything for these people because it brought him joy, and ultimately it made a community that would leave a legacy that lasted forever. Guys, if we want this place to be a place where we can leave a legacy that lasts forever, we have to do this. See, a community that leaves a legacy takes the risk to be wholehearted. Guys, many of us in this room, that scares the crap out of us. I have to go all in, 100%. And here's what that doesn't mean, all right? I just want to make sure that we get clear with this. That doesn't mean you share your deepest, darkest with everybody that's in this room, all right? Not even Jesus shared everything with all the disciples. He even had his trusted few that were with him, all right? But what that does mean is that we don't walk into this place and judge somebody across the room because of maybe how they act at school. Here's the thing. All of us have a mask at school. You should be happy that they showed up and that they're looking for hope. For many of us in this room, we have that wall up that's keeping us from sharing that sin that we've been struggling with a long time because, oh my gosh, if people knew that about me, man, it would change their opinion. Man, if that's what you feel in this place, I'm sorry. That's not how it's supposed to be. This should be a place where, man, when we share that sin, when we share that struggle, that we rally around each other and say, hey, I see you. I'm with you. Man, how can I help you? If you need somebody to check in, I got you. Like, this is what this church was doing. When they were hurting, they hurt together. When they were crying, they would cry together. When they would laugh together. Maybe for some of us, we hear this and we go, that's cool, everything, Tanner, but you don't know my story. Man, these walls are difficult. I get it. But I promise you this, if you're putting these walls up to protect your heart, you might protect it, but I also promise your heart will shrink. It will get smaller. See, the beautiful thing about Paul is he loved ferociously. I mean, this dude took care of people. He would sacrifice everything for people. And so, yeah, we might shut down, put these walls up, and not open up. But what we're risking is that our heart will shrink, that we won't have the love for people that brings us joy, that we won't see people like Jesus sees them. And so here's my challenge for us in this room. Man, what would it look like if we just gave it all to Jesus? What would it look like if we surrendered our walls, surrendered what we're going through, these things that we're putting up, to go all in on this community? That when we're not here, because it's going to happen, because sometimes some of us have sports, some of us got family stuff. Man, my hope for you guys is that when you're not here, it upsets you. You're like, man, this community, I am so close with them that, like, when I'm not with them, it hurts. It hurts. I need them. But this would be a place where we can rejoice together, laugh together, create memories together, but also cry together and not feel judged in the meantime. It makes me think of, this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll go into a time of worship. Makes me think of the Grinch. We all know the Grinch, right? I mean, think about the Grinch, right? What made his heart so small? What? Greedy. Here's the thing. I'm going to be real with you guys. When you don't open up your heart to people in this room, you're being greedy. I'm going to be real. You're being greedy. You know why? People deserve to get to know you. You matter. God created you in a beautiful, amazing way. And when you put up those walls, you're robbing people of experiencing the joy that God has put in you. Don't be greedy, because you're going to be like the Grinch. One day you're going to find yourself alone on a mountain. Maybe not a mountain, that's kind of weird. But maybe you'll find yourself alone in your life, right? Not letting anybody in. And when you look at the world, you're just going to be cynical and angry and judgmental. But what happened to the Grinch? Who came along to bring him life and joy? Who came along? Yes. Right? And she started to soften his heart, and he opened up. And before he knew it, there's an entire community that embraced him and loved him. My hope for you guys in this room is that as we start to change to this thing called legacy, that we would leave a legacy of a place that when people walk in here, they can be wholehearted. Not 25%, 50%, but all in. Now, is that a risk? Yeah. But I hope it's a risk that you guys are willing to take. So let me pray for us, and let's worship together, and then we'll go to small groups. Hey, God, I thank you just for your word. I thank you for the letter that Paul wrote to the church of the Thessalonians, God, and Lord, I thank you for his example of being wholehearted. But Lord, I also got to be real. That's uncomfortable for us. God, there's probably many of us in this room right now, we hear that and we are wrestling in this tension. I don't want to do that. Is that really what it takes? But Lord, I pray that we would know that you're in the midst of that. That God, that when we take that risk, you're with us. That you're by our side, God, there to protect us. And God, if we do take that risk and we do get hurt, God, I pray that we would know that you're there to also heal us, to be with us. But God, if those of us in this room have had that hurt in our story when we've taken those risks in the past, God, I pray that that wouldn't make us bitter. That it would stop us from sharing in small groups, but Lord, that this could be an opportunity right now that as we go into this time of worship, that we can surrender all of those things, surrender our hurt, surrender our walls, surrender the things that are keeping us from being all in for this community, all in for who you are. And so, Lord, whatever students in this room that's struggling with God, Lord, I pray that you would meet them where they're at right now. God, that they would feel your presence in this room. And Lord, as we go into this time of worship, it'd be a moment for us to surrender it all, to give it to you, Jesus, so that you can make this a community that leaves a legacy that matters and that lasts forever, not because of anything that we've done, because of how you've modeled it for us, Jesus, and because of what you're doing through us. Lord, we thank you that you love us. We thank you that you meet us where we're at. And we thank you for the model of Paul, and that, God, that you've given us a way to follow that. Lord, help us to be all in. Help us to be wholehearted. Help us to see more of you.